Hey, Marvin. Marvin is waking up.
I'm just trying to unmute. Hi, Adrian, how are you?
Yeah, good. You're fine?
How's the Energy Club going?
Closed for the time being.
Yeah. How was it going?
It was good. Yeah. 9 to 11 persons a day visiting, and it was okay. Yeah, it's still okay because we're now going to webinars.
Right. Yeah, which makes sense.
Yeah, there's a bigger audience. Yeah.
Okay. Hoi. Goedemorgen met Anja. Ja, hoi. Wij hebben nog, ja, hij is nog wel.
Good morning, everyone. I see we have already 21 participants. My name is Sabine van der Leij. I'm one of the hosts of the webinar. We will start in a couple of minutes. I expect that there will be some people attending, some more people. So we wait just a couple of minutes and then we get started. And for now, I would ask you just to mute your mics to make it easier for everyone to talk. So good morning, everyone. I think we have already 30 participants and it's 10:30, at least within the Netherlands. In the UK, it's 9:30. I welcome you all to this webinar of ProCirc, where I will give you an introduction. My name is Sabine van der Leij. I'm one of the hosts. I'm from the Netherlands, working at Rijkswaterstaat, which is part of the Ministry and of Infrastructure and Water Management, and we are the lead beneficiary for this ProCirc project. I'm hosting this webinar with my colleague Mervyn Jones. He will host the second part about the toolbox. If you have any questions during the webinar, please put them up in the chat, and then at the end of my story, I will try to answer most questions as possible. For now, the agenda for this webinar, I will give an introduction for about 15 minutes about ProCirc. I will tell you more about the aims of ProCirc, the benefits of joining ProCirc, and what you can expect from ProCirc. We do also have a toolbox. Mervyn will tell you more about the toolbox. He will give you an overview on it. He will give you a little insight on what circular procurement is, and give you more information about what we mean by tools, why we should use them, and how you are able to choose the right tool. But first, to give you more information about ProCirc. What is ProCirc about? ProCirc is actually a program to accelerate the shift from a linear to a circular economy. Our goal is to have a reduction up to 25% of raw materials, waste, and carbon dioxide emissions. The program is situated in the North Sea region, and we have 11 partners and 6 countries. And this program is set up because we would like to help solving the NSR waste crisis and resource scarcity. To look a little bit more closer into the why of ProCirc, at this moment, within the NSR economy, we see that we consume about 960 million tons of raw materials. We produce 360 million tons of waste, and we have about 21 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions each year. And it gets worse because it's growing each year. This leads to huge environmental damage, cost of processing waste, and loss of value in materials. And the resources, what we see is that the NSR is also facing increasing scarcity of resources and increasing costs of importing new materials internationally. And this waste crisis and the resource scarcity is actually exacerbated by traditional linear economy activity. And this is why we would like to encourage a circular economy to have less waste and to contain the highest value when reusing materials and use as less raw materials as possible. This European program, I'm going too quickly. The ProCirc objectives are that we would like to test and improve and validate circular procurement in practices and pilot projects. ProCirc is set up to set up pilots. We would like to harmonize and upscale the use of circular requirements in procurement. We want to create long-term collaboration framework between procurers, suppliers, and supply chain stakeholders. And we would like to increase market capacity of circular suppliers and their supply chain. This program is actually built on the belief that by sharing the different expertise, ideas, experience, and resources available in each country, it will be possible to improve on existing solutions. The program is about learning by doing, testing new ideas and strategies in a variety of contexts to see what really works, and then sharing these insights with other regions and organizations. As mentioned, it's a European program around the North Sea region. We have about 11 partners over 6 countries. UK is involved, the Netherlands, Belgium, Denmark, Norway, Sweden, and Asia Plus is part of ProCirc as well. They have a facilitating role also outside the NSR area. We have some targeted sectors, and they are construction, infrastructure, furniture, ICT, and textiles, but these are not the only sectors we work in. If there are any other circular procurement projects that are really interesting, then they also could be part of ProCirc. So these sectors are not limited. If you see what ProCirc would like to achieve, we would like to accelerate the shift from a linear to a circular economy by procurement power, alliances, and capacity building. And we would like to save up to 20% carbon dioxide emissions per pilot, use less raw materials, and use less waste. if we look at our strategy, we have circular procurement, of course. This is what the project is about. We would like to set up over 30 pilots in which we are going to stimulate the upscale of circular business models, products and services through standardization of circular procurement practices. We also would like to enhance collaboration. Procurers, businesses, and supply chain stakeholders set up structures for long-term collaboration and practical learning. Actually, the program of ProCirc is a peer-to-peer learning and action program, as we call it. We would like to stimulate innovation to promote new innovations and economic opportunities, and we would like to create a market in which we have region-wide markets for circular businesses. Procurement organizations, they can stimulate circular economy using their own demand to change markets while having a direct impact on business models. This will promote new innovations, economic opportunities, decrease carbon emissions, and the use of resources by closing product and material loops. And we would like to encourage suppliers and supply chain to redirect their activities in a more sustainable direction. One of the things that is also important is the upscaling. If we have all the information and all the lessons learned from all the pilots, we would like to disseminate the information also within the platforms within ProCirc, but also platforms outside of ProCirc. And there will be a sort of high-level policy learning group set up that will involve directors and high-level politicians to focus on the influence and to help us co-implement the transnational circular framework. If we take a closer look at the pilots, we have different phases identified. We have the phase 1, and this is where we invite organizations that are interested in participating in the ProCirc Procure to Procure Learning and Action plan, and look for pilots, and we collect the information about the pilots. This is when you get an introduction letter and a pilot application form, so we know a little bit more about the pilot you're going to conduct. At this phase, you also get access to the self-assessment maturity matrix, and we've set up an open communication platform. I think next week it will be, this week it will be working, and it's actually sort of online space where you can connect to each other, can exchange experiences and information, also ask questions to meet other procurers who, for example, have solutions for you or share the same problems. If you go to phase 2, this is the initiation phase. This is where you get the letter of commitment to sort of tell us that you're committed to ProCirc and also committed to contribute to reduction of the usage of virgin materials and carbon dioxide emissions, and also the reduction of waste. We will help you to set up a sort of pilot learning plan, which can help you to set up the goals that you have with your pilot, and to see if you're progressing on achieving these goals. And this will help you to implement the pilots with support and also with interaction from ProCirc network. If you're going to phase 3, we have the piloting phase. This is actually the pilot itself, where you get all different kind of tools, like the Circular Procurement Toolbox, which Mervyn is going to tell you more about. We also have set up expert task forces. These are sort of help services that you can get in touch with if you have any questions concerning, for example, your pre-tendering phase, your tendering phase, how to set up market engagement, or what you can do about monitoring. We also do have different communities of practices set up in different countries that you can attend, be part of. And we also have, which is not mentioned here, different workshops that you can attend, because as we're also having partner meetings, every partner meeting will have a workshop, and you can be part of this workshop. Or even your pilot can be part of this workshop to tell us more about. Then we go to phase 4, evaluation and upscaling. This is about making it common practice. It is about the organization that evaluate their pilots based on the pilot and learning plan, and try to see how they can sort of upskill their plan within their organization and how to get more support within the organization to make it sort of common business. And also, this is the part where we give you sort of a fact sheet that you can put all the lessons learned in that we can share with each other to learn from all the pilots that have been set up. Then we have phase 5. This is about the dissemination. This is also a sort of, would like to set up sort of roadmap, how to conduct the pilots and how also to get support from higher levels. And we would really love it if you could, as a pilot, also participate in the ProCirc network further on to share your story, to share what you've been learning as well. So what are the benefits of participating in ProCirc? You will get a network, you will get knowledge, and you will get insight and tools, and you will get support as well. Concerning network, as I mentioned, we have an open circular procurement community in which you get in touch with other procurers to see how they have been working within their pilots and how they solve problems. We have a learning and practical collaboration between those procurers. You can participate in the communities of practices and workshops, and it's also a platform for your organization itself to show what you have been doing. As far as knowledge, we have a lot of expertise in tendering in different sectors, like textiles, buildings, furniture, but also concerning catering or other sectors. And we have access to many examples of circular procurement in different sectors as well. We have already a lot of fact sheets that you can use. Some of them are in Dutch, but we can translate them. Then you will get insight and tools. We're trying to set up sort of minimum circularity requirements throughout and between the organizations in the NSR that will help you to set up your strategy also for your tender. There will be a transnational implementation roadmap that will explain how organizations can ensure that circular procurement practice is being supported by policy and vice versa. We have a toolbox with tools for different stages in a tender. And you will get support from the task forces on the different tendering phases. And we have several partners within this ProCirc project. And you can also ask if there is a possibility for them to give you some support. Some partners do have the ability to give you more support. Some partners, they just can link you to the other people within the ProCirc network. So that's a bit different concerning what project you're, which partner you're working with. This actually was mainly my story about the ProCirc program. I will see if we have people that have any questions so far. So I don't see many questions, which means that everything was clear. Or thank you, Veerle. If you have any questions later on, please feel free to contact one of the partners and we will answer your question. So thank you. All right, then I would like to give the word to Mervyn, who will guide you through the toolbox. Thank you very much for listening for this part.
Thank you, Sabine, and good morning, everybody. My name, as you've heard, is Mervyn Jones. So good morgen, bonjour, good morgen, and guten morgen, and any other language. Welcome to the ProCirc webinar. The section I'm going to give now is really about a little more in terms of looking at what we're trying to do with the toolbox. So I'm going to be explaining, as you can see here, the overview of the work package, what circular procurement is. I know many of you will already know or have a version of circular procurement, but it's always useful, I think, just in case there are people here not necessarily familiar with the circular procurement principles. What do we mean by tools? Why should pilots use tools? And just a little bit on choosing the right tool. So in terms of work package 3, what is a toolbox? It's
Mervyn, I'm sorry to interrupt you because everyone sees my screen. Can you share your screen, please?
That's always one of the problems with me and technology is I've been happily presenting through the presentation. I I don't even think I'm sharing the right screen at the moment. Okay. F5. So that's me. That's what we'll be looking at. And this is where we are now. So in terms of toolboxes, what are we looking at here? We're looking at a collection of tools and services to help you and the pilots and the organizations that are running and hosting those pilots manage, enable, and share procurement information. And what we're trying to do with the ProCirc toolbox, I'll go into a little more detail further down the line. First of all, though, what is circular procurement? Nice little diagram there from Circular Flanders. So happy to use that in terms of what are we trying to do. Essentially, what we're looking at with circular procurement is using procurement as a mechanism to enable, encourage, accelerate the delivery of a more circular economy within Europe. So in terms of definitions, always useful to start with the definition. There's not just a single definition and it's what works best for your organization. But in essence, we're looking at an approach to deliver sustainability goals that recognizes the role that organizations can play in supporting the transition towards a circular economy, as I've just said. And in the context of the public sector, that's a process by which public authorities purchase their goods and services, and they seek to contribute to closing material and energy loops within the supply chains, whilst minimizing and hopefully avoiding negative environmental impacts and the waste created alongside of that. So it's really focusing on the key aspects here of circular economy that are around closing material and product loops, using public procurement as a mechanism for driving that within the marketplace, but also retaining value as highly as possible, as long as possible within those loops. Circular procurement is not just buying circular products. Yes, we want to encourage circular products, but equally circular procurement is around integrating the processes and the systems and the organizational behaviors alongside the purchase of circular products. So it's always useful, particularly when we're talking about pilots, to think about pilots not just about how can we actually look at products, but also in terms of pilots, how can you use the pilots to engage more with the market sector? How can you use the pilots to engage more even internally within your organizations to ensure that functions fully understand what role that they play in terms of procurement? Because as we all know, procurement is a cycle and it's not just about the purchasing of products themselves. And again, it's always useful, as this slide shows, to link back to the Sustainable Development Goals. And again, this OECD statistic that shows that around 65% of that 169 SDG targets can't be reached without the commitments of local and regional governments. And that includes and is very dependent on how regional governments spend their money, so through procurement again. And that leads us on to the key principles when we're talking about circular procurement, and it's that systematic approach following a life cycle approach. In this case, it's looking not just at sourcing, at the sustainable procurement and the green public procurement principles, but also utilization, looking at how you can optimize lifetimes or even extend lifetimes, and then looking at what the role of procurement is in terms of purchasing on maximizing the value retention through disposal choices. So again, what happens at end of life when you finished using that product or even the service that the products are being used in, what happens next? And again, just to reinforce that, purchasing, use and disposal, we typically look at where does it come from, who made it, and what is it made out of, the sourcing questions. We're very good at doing that through sustainable public procurement. But really, when we're thinking about a systematic and integrated approach and how procurement can fit in, it's how will it be used? And that offers opportunities, for example, in things like business models. And also, as I've just said previously, what's going to happen to it afterwards. And the more we can think about that up front, the more likely we are to be able to control what happens at end of life. And the Dutch have been looking at this now for quite a number of years. And last year, they produced a circular procurement in 8 steps through one of the European projects, through Rebus. It was funded to create this book that looked at circular procurement across 8 different steps, from definition to ambition, looking at the role of the internal organization, how to define need, looking at the impact and the potential opportunities for alternative business models, looking at the role that market collaboration plays. And 2 things there, market dialogue and collaboration are key principles when we talk about circular economy. Also, the tender procedure, measuring and awarding, and contract management. And if we look at those in terms of their roles within the procurement cycle, those first 5 steps are essentially strategic steps. And the last 3, as you can see, are more operational steps. And really what we're looking for with the ProCirc pilots is something that combines that integrated approach. Again, something that is looking to develop a more strategic approach, not just to embed circular principles in tenders, but also how to embed those processes and those methodologies into organizational thinking and behaviors moving forward. So let's go interactive. We have got a question and answers little tab down at the bottom, but we don't want to use that because that doesn't get recorded. So please use the chat room to share your views here. And while I'm talking, just have a think about what procurement tools do you commonly use and how do these relate to circular procurement as you understand it, as I've explained it. So if you just put that into the chat room, you can either send that to us as the panelists privately, or you can send it to everybody by simply using the little button down there at the bottom right-hand side in the chat room. So please share with us what your views are in terms of the procurement tools that you're commonly using. While you're doing that, what I'll carry on is, what do we mean by tools? There's different types of tools. There's tools that link to ambition and planning. There's tools that link to pre-tender, tools that link to specification, to evaluation, and to contract performance, and also follow through to end of life. So when we talk about planning and ambition setting, strategic capacity building tools, tools looking at spend priorities, spend analysis, where to get the best value for money. When we talk about pre-tender, we're talking about tools that link around market dialogue, key performance indicators, forecasting tools, looking at what's likely to happen. And these are quite important for us within the ProCirc project, because as Sabine was saying, we have 3 key targets to look at getting pilots to reduce by 20% their CO2 and their raw materials impacts, but also 25% of waste reduction impacts. So again, even if we don't use any other tools, some kind of tools that are looking at forecasting and key performance indicators within contracts will help evidence what measures we're taking and how successful they are. And the one that probably most people are familiar with in terms of tools are around the specification stage, looking at criteria through green public procurement criteria, through circular criteria. Also tools that enable us to ask more functional questions rather than necessarily prescriptive questions. And again, templates. And then when we get into evaluating, it's around award criteria, weighting, tools. And in terms of contract performance, not forgetting that it doesn't stop at contract award, but we're also looking at performance improvement within contract, especially when we talk about large-scale contracts that might involve frameworks. But that, and linked into that with asset management, can also follow through in terms of how we end up disposing. Are we disposing through collection systems that are focused on recycling, or can we enable collection systems that actually focus more on reuse, which saves more carbon and actually retains value in products for longer? When's the best time to use tools? Using those simple steps at the bottom there of the procurement life cycle. Again, we can see that sustainability gains decline over the course of tendering a contract. And there's a slight opportunity to improve sustainability gains if we consider asset disposal at the end. But when we're setting specifications, no great surprise that specifications tend to get fixed by the specification stage. There is a little bit of opportunity later on at contract negotiation, but typically we're setting specifications and fixing them there. So the key area in terms of influence and the key area in terms of impact is actually these early stages. And again, that's something to consider when you're thinking about your pilots. It's not just pilots focused on this stage of a procurement cycle, but also what sustainability gains, and if we're talking about 20 and 25% reductions, what opportunities are there here through our ambition and procurement planning, our pre-tender, our engagement with the market. So examples of procurement toolboxes, there are a number of those already out there. There's toolboxes around policy. For example, in this case, we have the OECD Procurement Policy Toolbox. That's a live link, so when you get the presentation, you can click through that and have a look at that. But also then there's combinations. There's far more practical approaches like this one from Scotland, where the whole of a procurement cycle is mapped into a journey, and there are different stations on that journey, and you can click and you can get relative bits of information and guidance. So why should we use pilots? Why should we use tools in pilots? Sharing common and consistent aims and approach and language is obviously a key benefit, particularly when we're talking about a project with a large number of pilots, but also within your own organization. Again, that common terminology, that common language and approach helps in terms of a procurement function being able to be more consistent, delivering over time. Forecasting, as I previously mentioned, what pilots are trying to achieve, but also again within organizations, what you're trying to achieve, also being able then to see how successful the measures are that you're putting in place. So impacts, savings potential, etc. Really useful when you're building internal business cases to actually do something different from business as usual. Engaging internal, external stakeholders in the pilot procurement. Again, tools are really helpful there, particularly when we're talking about benchmarking, baselining, and market dialogue. And also, again, in terms of introducing circular procurement into the tendering procedure. I'm focusing here and thinking more about the strategic tools at this particular point. And then embedding circular principles into contract management use. That's more about the back end, the operational end. And then finally, last, if you like, but not least, most importantly, is actually tools to enable us to monitor and report outcomes. So what's our approach been in terms of work package 3 so far? Looking with the other work packages and also looking across projects. It's not just the ProCirc project that's got toolboxes. There's projects like City Loops that have toolboxes, many other European projects. And looking at tools, not just in terms of the quantitative tools and the practical tools around the procurement aspects, but things like creating a common definition and glossary of circular procurement terms, again, standardizing, harmonizing, being more consistent in what we mean by different terms, considering that as a tool. Developing the business case, again, like I've said, some tools enable, help, and facilitate the development of that internal business case. Strategic procurement tools, operational tools, which we've been talking about, and then the ones, again, that probably most of you are familiar with here, circular criteria, key performance metrics, etc. And so on and so forth. So when we're talking about a toolbox, we can have quite a broad concept of what it is that we're talking about here. You know, capacity building modules, training, also case studies, you know, they all in different toolboxes count as tools. But as I said right at the beginning of my part of this presentation, what we're really focusing on here are tools that are going to enable the pilots to be able to move forward quickly at pace and demonstrate what it is that they're doing and the impact that that's achieving. So what's our approach? There's usually two types of tools. There's a self-assembled toolbox, if you like, something that you might have underneath your stairs in a cupboard in a box, or in a garage if you're fortunate to have a garage that's been built up over time. It's trusted because you've used these, you've created these tools, you've bought these tools, but typically it's reactive and it's limited. I'm thinking here of my own toolbox at home. Then you also have these curated tools that were assembled by other people coming from outside third parties that are looking to cover all eventualities that they'll think you need in a given situation. What we're trying to do in ProCirc is to combine those, to have a third way, if you like, where our approach is to initiate a toolbox from the partners for the benefit of the pilots, based on our experience and the experience as users and the experience as partner countries within the ProCirc project. But the key bit here is to allow it to be customized in the sense of allowing tools to be added, and therefore adopting what I would consider a more cooperative approach, so that it enables you to share your experiences of using particular tools with other people. You typically use certain tools because you, as I said, you trust them, you understand how to use. There may be better tools to deliver better outcomes, but that's where you need this learning network, if you like, that ProCirc is about creating. And the toolbox is a practical way of actually bringing that learning network together. This also improves utilization and feedback. Again, utilization, a key principle here when we're talking about circular economy. So the initial toolbox content, we went round the partners at the beginning of December right through to the end of February, and have identified a suite of around 26 tools, which have been categorized according to their relevance to different areas in the procurement cycle. These have a very broad focus. Again, there's a very broad set of definitions around circular economy, so no surprise, there's a broad focus in terms of the tools that have been nominated by different partners. They're not just circular, life cycle analysis tools are in there, but again, when we think that circular principles are around a systemic integrated approach, then life cycle analysis tools certainly fall into that category. Some are generic, some are more specific, criteria specific or sector specific, like the construction sector, BREEAM as the example there. But the key bit here is that it's a live toolbox. It's constantly going to be added to and updated by users, hopefully by yourselves. So the next question in the chat room, with what we'd like to get some feedback from you, is what type of procurement tools are you using most commonly? Are they policy related tools? Are they planning, prioritization, decision-making tools? Are they specification tools, typically criteria, or contract monitoring tools, or anything else? What would be really useful is to know from yourselves what type of tools you typically are using. So again, use the chat room, either share it to everybody or just back to the panelists. That would be some great feedback. Thank you. So moving on, choosing the right tools. A key point to get across is there's no one size fits all tool. There's no silver bullet, there's no single tool that does everything. Hopefully, as I've shown and as you'll appreciate from your own experiences, when we're talking about a procurement cycle, different tools are appropriate at different points within a procurement cycle, typically relating to different decision-making points, key critical points. They also link to key phases in the cycle, as I've just said, and that depends also on the subject matter, which again links across into some being very sector specific, some being more generic, but there are a lot of tools, particularly around procurement, that relate to the construction sector through infrastructure, through buildings. It also depends in terms of choosing the right tool on the organizational policy, the in-house policy, the degree of external security requirements in terms of your IT platforms, the ability to operate online tools or have independent downloaded tools. Also, whether they're third-party accredited or verified, or whether they've been developed in-house, whether they're free or whether you have to pay a subscription. Quite a number of tools are subscription-based because behind most tools there is a need to actually maintain them. There's also usually databases from which you can get the benefit, for example, through benchmarking against other organizations. And then when we're talking about, certainly in terms of contract verification, tender verification, sorry, supplier-owned tools, providing self-verified evidence of meeting various different requirements and criteria. Finally, but also again, let's not forget, quite important, the use of tools depends on personal choice. In some individuals are more familiar with certain types of tools and the way that they work than with other ones. It has to be what's going to be worked. So what have we done so far? We've created a toolbox format, trying to keep the platform very, very simple. It's in Excel, as you can probably work out from the tabs at the bottom. So on the left-hand side, we have tool name and a hot link to the external location. Then we have an information link, which if you click on that button, you'll get a summary description of the tool, a little more information behind it, what it's used for. My builds aren't. There's some builds missing, so hopefully you can see the cursor on the screen. The next bit is that we have the sectors, and again, we have key sectors where a lot of tools can be found, like ICT and like construction. Some are less, they're not sector bound, some are generic tools, and so on. So again, what sectors those tools are typically being used in and are relevant to. Then we have the phase within the procurement cycle, the focus of the tool. So it could be a tool that's focusing on cost, it could be a tool that's focusing on carbon reduction or on waste reduction, material flows, and so on and so forth. We also have the type of tool. So is it a procurement related tool? Is it a certification tool? Is it a management tool? Is it an information resource? Bearing in mind, that tools mean different things to different people. And finally, again, but importantly, also what language and region the tool has come from. A lot of the tools are written in English as a common trading language, but there are many of the tools in the toolbox as it currently stands, which are written in national language, either Dutch or Danish or Swedish as well. So again, it's an indication across the whole of the toolbox. Now, apologies for this, there should have been more builds on this. There's a help button there, which tools to use, which will give you a little bit more background information. And I'll go into just a little bit further down the line, how to actually access the toolbox. So again, a final question from me. What types of tools are you most interested in? So we've looked at what tools are you commonly using, what stages of the procurement cycles you use, but what types of tools are you interested in? Because again, this will help us improve the toolbox. So if you could put some responses back into the chat room, that would be really appreciated. So moving on then in terms of next steps, 5 minutes or so on next steps, and then we'll open this up to questions. How to access the tool, again, a call for additional tools, and so on. What the ProCirc project is all about is not just creating pilots, but creating a learning community, creating a learning network, if you like. That's a key principle behind the ProCirc project. One of the things that the work packages are doing are bringing together a community space online, and it's the public innovation community, and within that community there's lots of good information. There's information here around project templates and guidelines, and you can also click through to the circular procurement tool once you've got access to this. The project will send out an email with the opportunity to register and get access to this. It's free registration, but you will have to create a registration and a password for access onto the community. But that's a really useful resource to bring to your attention. The next bit, when you click through that community platform, you'll come to a Google Drive link, and within that Google Drive link, there's the ProCirc Toolbox, the spreadsheet that I was talking to you about. And again, as I've said, the link will be provided to the pilots who register, and it'll also be available through the online platform. A key point here is that you need to download the document and open it in Excel, because the macros don't work on the Google Drive or in Google Spreadsheets. So that would just be a really important point to remember, and also remember to enable those macros, or else you're not going to get the benefit from the tool. Final question, what additional tools would you recommend? Yeah, these might be tools that you commonly use, or tools that you think are very relevant to other members of the ProCirc pilot community. And if you need to have contacts, there are contacts in every country. These are the partners. Again, hot links there within the presentation: in Belgium, in Denmark, Netherlands, Norway, Scotland, and also in Sweden. The lead for Work Package 3 is Circular Flanders, and the link to the Circular Flanders website is down there. So that's pretty much it in terms of the presentation part that I've got to give. Really now it's over to you. This is an interactive session. I hope it's been a little interactive, at least with some of the questions, but what we'd really like to do now is to get some of your feedback on how you think toolboxes can be used, what elements within the toolboxes are useful, and also what you'd like to see going forward in terms of helping pilots. So with that, I will finish. Thank you very much for bearing with me, and a few hiccups there in terms of the presentation, but I hope that didn't ruin the experience. Does anybody have any questions? Would any of the other panelists like to come in and give any observations as partners within the ProCirc project on their perceptions?
Mervyn, there's a question from Colding Municipality in the chat. Perhaps you can give them the word.
Lovely, thanks, Phil. So Colding Municipality is in Denmark, and they're mainly looking at procuring transport vehicles and machinery in a way that is as circular as possible. We would very much like to see available tools. Okay, there's again in the context of the tools, one of the key bits is understanding where within the procurement cycle you are in terms of the procurement phase for the transport vehicles and machinery. So, yeah, working forwards in terms of transport vehicles, a great example, one that still gets used time and time again, is in Bremen in Germany, when they were looking at procuring vehicles within the city, within the various different departments. They were looking at end of pipe emissions, and I think at that stage it was EU 4 and 5 levels. They chose level 5 for reducing the NOx emissions at the end of pipe. And then somebody within Bremen said, well, let's look at this a little more strategically. When we're utilizing our vehicles, we're only utilizing them for around 20% of the time. We would actually save more carbon, which was a metric that they were looking to actually address if they actually improve the utilization rate of vehicles. So not only did they specify more energy efficient vehicles, but also they then looked at ways of improving the utilization rate. That was so successful that they ended up creating a scheme that actually started sharing public sector vehicles out of hours with the citizens in Bremen. And they created a far greater impact by looking at that end than they did just by simply looking at the front end. So that was a long-winded example for simply saying, in terms of the procurement, it really is key as to what phase you're in, and then we can look to sort of match the right tools to that particular phase. If you're not at that phase and you're just simply at the point of tendering, then it's again looking at GPP criteria and looking at more circular criteria. I would also bring in the point here, it's about the options around business models. So again, is an ownership model necessarily the model that you need to be looking at? That Bremen example, they ended up leasing the vehicles from a car share company. So they actually ended up not owning the vehicles themselves. So again, there's different options and different tools available at different points. Is there a timescale to which the project includes all international partners? That's a good question. It's not one that I can answer, Ola. So maybe if some of the other panelists were able to come in, who have a better understanding of that timescale. But I'm taking from your question, it's what timescale do we want the pilots to be working over within the context of the project? Perhaps Sabine or Melody could come in and help answer that one. To what extent have the pilot projects thus far gained engagement from the procurement departments? That's a really good question. That's actually one I think that the pilots need to answer themselves. So thanks, Joel. But what we're looking for, as I said, within the ProCirc projects are projects that are doing something different from what they were doing before. They're not necessarily all at the same stages. So some are, quite a few are actually at the pre-procurement, the more strategic phases, looking at prioritization. In the case of Scotland, with Joel, one of those examples is with Scotland Excel. So looking to get circular criteria for the selection of suppliers heavily embedded into their framework, so that the users of those frameworks, the public entities that are then calling off on those frameworks, are then able to be more specific and then ask for more circular outcomes as a result.
Maybe to answer the question of Ola, we have this project will be about 3 years, but obviously tender projects can last up to longer. So it's not that your tender has to be ready within these 3 years, because for every phase there will be lessons learned. So it's a bit up to you. It would be great if you could have all the lessons learned from the entire project from the beginning until the monitoring and the contracting phase, but if not, everything will help in this case.
Thanks, Sabine. Terry has just made a very important point, and hopefully that wasn't lost too much when I went through the slides at pace, but absolutely correct. Engagement is a really important factor. Engagement in many senses equals collaboration, looking at linking with the market to be able to communicate what the ambitions are that you have. Now, typically engagement happens on tender by tender basis. If you're really lucky, it tends to happen at category level. But if we're being more strategic and more circular about it and getting the best outcomes, then engagement has to be an integral part of the procurement cycle. So that happens early on. It happens in terms of communicating, as I say, the ambition of what it is that you're trying to achieve. Another key aspect of engagement is about the ability to communicate the size of the market, communicate what the potential demand is. So when we're asking for circular products or more circular business models, one of the key barriers to doing something different from business as usual is the risk of doing something different or an additional cost. Now, one of the things from a supply chain's perspective is being able to understand how they can offset that risk, not by having a guarantee of a market, but by knowing that there will be a market in which they can compete fairly. So there is a key link there. And the Dutch, I mean, lots of countries have their own tools in terms of market engagement, but the Dutch are very good at putting their tools on the Piano website. So that's Pianno, I think, or Noo. Piano website.
It's Noo. Pianoo.nl.
Yeah. So it's the Piano is their centre of excellence, their national centre of excellence for procurement, sustainable procurement. So really useful website there. Obviously, a lot of it is in Dutch, but also very helpfully, a lot of it is in English. And they have some good guidelines. They have some good tools there in terms of market engagement. Oh, thank you, Sabine. That's one of the brilliant things about these webinar things. So in the chat panel, you can now see the link to Piano's website. Are there any more questions? Are there any more comments from any of the panelists? No? Okay. What I don't want to do is waste any more of your valuable time than we have to do in terms of just waiting for questions. What I said right at the beginning is that this chat room, that you can perhaps, if I share my screen, the chat room, sorry, that's not working. The chat room that is on the right-hand side of your screens, if you've got that dialog box open, that has been recorded. So what we'll do after this webinar is we'll go through it and we will look at all the questions and see if we've answered them as best we can. If we can't, then we'll get back to you in terms of answers. The key point again to actually mention is that you will get a link to the community platform and also to the toolbox itself. So you'll be able to look at it in more detail yourself. Ola's asked, are we planning to send the presentation to everybody? The short answer is yes. Whether that's actually in the form of a PDF or whether that's a link on the actual platform, not entirely sure, but you will have access to the presentation. So that would be useful. And finally, perhaps if Speller could share, we've got a very quick poll since we have a few minutes left. Ask lots of questions. You've been really good at answering those. Thank you very much for your feedback. So just a very quick one in terms of a poll, in terms of circular economy and circular procurement tools. Have you used these before? And if yes, more than once, or only once, or on a regular basis, or never at all? So if you could just answer that one, we'll leave that poll up to the end and then we'll send you the feedback. I think at this point, unless the poll comes up, unless anybody's got any more questions, I'll finish my part of the presentation now. So we've got 14 out of 26 have voted. Still have 35 people online. Brilliant. I should have also said thank you very much to Sabine for introducing me to the webinar.
Okay, that's us come to an end, I think. So thank you everyone and have a great day.